Oh, welcome to the Sharpe Show. So happy to have you with me this afternoon, not evening. It's a very special time, a little bit past 3 p.m. on the East Coast. And why in the world would I be bugging you guys at 3 p.m. on the East Coast when I'm usually on at 7? And I was just on my radio show at 1. Why would I do that? Because today is a very special show. It's a special show because it is dealing with an issue that libertarians deal with all the time. We often deal with when it comes to every other election we have. We think about what's the best way. How do we deal with this? What do we do? Can we get Democrats to help us? Can we get Republicans to help us? Should we run here? Should we run there? We always have these conversations all the time. Happens constantly. But today, I have someone on who literally has run as a libertarian in the past. He was our Libertarian Party Vice-Presidential candidate last year. And he wants to talk about how do we get the Republicans to move liberty forward. I'm bringing him on right now. The man, the myth, legend, my personal friend, ter Maat. How are you, sir?
Good. It's great to be with you today, Larry, at 3 p.m. or any time of day.
There we go. Excellent. To follow what Mike is doing, you can follow him on Twitter/X at ter Maat. That's M. If you're listening, TERMAAT _. The underscore, that makes it cool. Just so people are aware it does.
Well, and it differentiates from all the other ter Maats and Twitter, so that's all good.
There we go. So I want to ask this question, and that is, why would someone want to leave whatever they've built up in the Libertarian Party, good or bad, whatever they built up, and then take that step and move to the Republican Party Liberty Caucus, or to be forward, after 2020, a bunch of libertarians actually went to the Democratic Freedom Caucus. Right then, they made a shift to the Democratic side after 2020 or 2022. They made that shift.
Yep.
Why?
The way you put it is an interesting angle on it, Larry, because change is hard. The people that are joining me in this move are engaging in something that they believe in very strongly, and doing so despite the fact that it is uncomfortable. Change is hard. And before we get too far down this road, pretty far down which we are about to travel in great detail, I'm sure, I want to recognize that for a lot of these folks, these are substantial sacrifices that they're making. They're risking relationships, and they are risking nasty things being said about them.
Yep.
And they're doing it for no sense or opportunity of personal aggrandizement, right? They're doing this because, in answer to your question, as a team and as individuals, we believe that this is going to give us a shot at making a difference in American politics. It is one of those things that you do that you probably didn't think you were going to have to do if you go back not such a long period of time, right? Even months, much less years. It is something that I don't think anyone on this team anticipated that we would even be discussing, much less executing on. But a couple of things have changed.
Let me walk on that road if I could.
Yeah.
Right? For the people who may not know, this morning, Mike put out a press release saying that he and about 40 people, is my numbers about right? About 40 people? About 40 people are leaving, or weren't always, but are not going to be members of the Libertarian Party, but are going to become members of the Republican Liberty Caucus in the Republican Party in an attempt to actually move forward and try to move liberty forward. Now, obviously, people are going to be upset at you, clearly, obviously, right? I get that completely. With it in mind, it isn't the first time it's been done. This has happened before.
Right.
In fact, our presidential candidate from 2016, Austin Peterson, did the same thing.
Yep.
Our former, other former vice presidential candidate, Bill Weld, also left, the same thing.
And thanks, Larry, for putting my name in the same sentence as Bill Weld. I appreciate that.
I'm just giving the facts, brother. I'm just giving the facts. It's true. It's what happened. It has it. My point is, you aren't the first person to think this, right? This has happened in the past. People
for better or for worse
to make this happen. And that is my question to you, right? When a lot of the CLC people went to the Democratic Freedom Caucus, they didn't get success. It was not successful for them at all. It did not work, right? They did not work. When Bill Weld left, didn't work for him. When Austin Peterson left, didn't work for him. When we look at the Tea Party, that's kind of pushed away too. Obviously, you feel, you know this too, like you know this. So you felt like this was the time to move. Why is this different?
First of all, I think some people would argue that the Tea Party did have some success, depending on how you define success, because they got some traction and some attention. But in the main, you are right. And by the way, good on the folks that joined the Democratic Party. I think that the Democratic Party will eventually develop a libertarian wing. As a matter of fact, I'm almost certain of it. I think it's a natural fit for certain people that are more or less on the left-hand side of the Libertarian Party. I think it's a natural fit for a lot of folks that want to stand up for civil liberties. My problem with that idea is that I think it's going to take several hundred years for that to happen inside the Democratic Party. And on the off chance I'm not still alive by the time that that is achieved, it's probably not, you know, the best path for myself. There is a timing aspect to this. Speaking of thousands of years before it's achieved in the Democratic Party. Inside of the Republican Party is where I believe the battle is going to take place. The real fight that matters in American politics is going to happen inside the GOP as President Trump leaves, or in anticipation of him leaving. This is the battle that's going to matter. The way the Republican Party handles this is going to substantially color American politics. And I believe for some time, potentially longer than President Trump has been around, you know, the past 10 years around the Republican Party, his legacy will be at least as important as he has been. And that legacy is on a knife's edge. It could go either one of a couple of different ways.
I do want to grab a quick Rumble rant. Thank you for the $25. Uncle Smitty says, Mike is by far the biggest liberty activist I've seen and worked with since I came on the scene in 2010. Larry is a close second, of course. Well, I got number 2 on that one, Mike, so I guess that's good. I got number 2. So,
well, and you got the $25. So, you know,
good.
We got that going for us. I don't know that I'm the biggest advocate, but I will own the fact that I do not like to be outworked. And I can speak for myself, and I speak for a heck of a lot of people on this team. We are not going to be outworked when it comes to trying to spread the idea of libertarianism.
So let me push this piece here. You talked about the battle, and I see the battle actually happening right now in the Republican Party. I see 4 factions right now in the Republican Party. I see the old school neocons still trying to hold on.
Yep.
I see the MAGA / America Firsters who are very loyal to Trump and who often fight neocons, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right. I also see the Maha people. They're one of the smaller ones, but they're very vocal. And right now in the battle, they're the ones winning, right? They're getting successes. The Maha people are getting successes right now, even though
they've got a stalwart leader on the inside.
Bingo. Exactly right. So they're actually having, even though they're small, they're having some successes. And the last one is the tech bros, which I think are falling apart because Elon. Now, how does the Liberty Caucus fit within that world? Do they naturally align with one of them? Are they all separate? How do they, and 2 parts of that. The second part of this question is that leader going to be someone like a Thomas Massey, or is it someone who comes over from the Libertarian Party, or some combo? I gave a lot. I know I put a lot at you. I'm sorry.
Well, there is, and don't let me accidentally miss a piece of that. First of all, I really do enjoy your quadruplex taxonomy of the Republican Party. I think that is true, although I would argue that each of the 4 of those quadrants overlaps with others. Indeed, I could imagine individuals being at least a little bit in all 4 of them, right?
Okay.
A lot of the neocons define themselves in terms of militaristic foreign policy, whereas most of the rest of the folks oppose that. yes, the tech bros want a more libertarian stance in terms of economics.
Right.
But I believe that there are some that would characterize themselves as MAGA, would call themselves America Firsters. But I still believe that there is a significant contingency, even within that quadrant, that believes in free markets.
I'm with you on all that. And I'll add the second piece that you brought up, which is I've often said the current Republican Party has a lot of problems. And one of the problems is that it hasn't traditionally been a working class party, but it's now filled with working class voters, right? So that's a problem. And the second aspect is it's almost like the former Yugoslavia, held together by the strength of Tito. And then once Tito dies, what happens? And this is to your point, right? Which when Trump goes away, whether he quits, whether he doesn't run again or whatever, that's Tito leaving Yugoslavia.
That's a fascinating example. I'll leave it to you to explain to the youngsters who Tito was. He was not a good guy.
Correct. He was not.
And that's another angle on this that is really problematic. I think you're right that Donald Trump is holding together a coalition, but that coalition does have certain things in common, namely and mainly the idea that we should be skeptical of big government institutions, skeptical of the status quo, willing to shake things up. I think every one of those quadrants buys into that idea, with the possible exception of the neocons, right? Depending on how they might define themselves. But most of the rest like the idea, as do most libertarians, that we have a president who doesn't just buy into the idea that the way things were done last week is the way that things should be done next week. And that we should.
You think the libertarian wing could pick up support from all three except maybe neocons? Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And to the extent to which there are neocons who would define themselves as free marketers, if they can grow up and get rid of this tethered existence to ancient foreign policy, even those folks can be won over. I believe that the big schism inside of the GOP will be a schism that is in each one of those four quadrants.
All right. So if that's happening, then are you saying then that, okay, so now Trump goes away in whatever, 2028. And when he goes away, now someone's got to step in. And you're saying that person is going to either use libertarian values or libertarian rhetoric or libertarian something to be the new, better Tito, to be the new and better leader who will keep everyone together. And maybe the neocons will fight him, but he's going to lose anyway because the other 3 or 4 factions all join together under this person using that. Is that yes. Like a J?
Is that like that is where we're going? But to add another layer of complexity into your already complex explanation, with which I agree, is that even if it is someone left over from MAGA, even if it's J.D. Vance, let's at least make sure that before a guy like that takes the presidential nomination inside the Republican Party, that he has pledged to be on his best behavior in a way that we did not achieve with President Trump. And by the way, there are a lot of folks who I think are disappointed with the way this administration has gone. That's probably worth a whole nother conversation, given some of the things that President Trump said in advance. It is very difficult to hold any president's feet to the fire, even if you control the party, much less if you're merely a caucus, and double much less if it's a personality like Donald Trump, whose feet have never been held to anything. He just does what he wants to do. And that's part of his endearing attraction, for want of a less creepy way to describe it.
So let me touch a couple things if I could. I'm going to grab a couple of comments that are already popping up already. One VA dude says, just tuned in. Mike ter Maat rocks. So does Larry Sharpe. Oh, that's nice. I like that. That literally is teasing me. She goes, Larry looking spiffy in his collar shirt. I did. I put a collar shirt on for you, Mike. I did. She's right. She caught me. It's true. I did. I put a collar shirt on for Mike. That's true. I did.
I put a tie on for you.
But you always wear a tie. That wasn't for me. You always wear a tie. But I appreciate it though. Thank you. But yeah, absolutely. I've only seen you in a tie and like a polo shirt. That's like all I've ever seen you in. Those two.
Yeah, that's about
yeah.
it. Yeah,
That's about it. Exactly. Yes.
That's about it.
John says, unfortunately, the folks you mentioned, Larry, all of them traded many core principles for nothing. I don't want that to happen to anyone else. Austin went insane and hates many of us left. Well, I wouldn't say insane. However, he does hate a lot of us. That part's true. The second part's true. I don't think he went insane, but he does hate a lot of us. That part's accurate. So let me bring that piece up. It's a personal question, but you know, you're going to make some people angry. You already have made some people angry, right? How are you going to start feeling towards your former party members, right? This is on a personal note. Now, they're going to be saying, oh, Mike's a bad guy. Look what he did. He's terrible. Boo, Mike, right? Already, you know that, right? So now when you go there, is it going to be like, well, you know what? To hell with them too. How does it affect you? How does it affect you, Mike? I mean, they're going to be saying, oh, he's terrible. Look how bad he is, right?
Look, I understand I don't mean to blow off your question. It is an interesting and important question to a certain extent. It is easier for me than for a lot of others.
Okay.
Not to put too fine a point on it, but I am not a spring chicken anymore. This is not my first rodeo. I have been around the block. You do not work as a police officer on the road in South Florida for 11 and a half years without having some fairly nasty things said about you. Mm-hmm. Not that big a deal.
Okay.
I worry more about some of the people who are also making the jump, right? Because
okay, yeah,
there are some youngsters.
Do you want to mention
what
a couple?
They're doing is very courageous.
Do you want to mention a couple? Go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for that. Michael Smith, who used to lead the Broward County Libertarian Party and had that thing built up to being what I believe was probably the strongest county organization in the United States for the Libertarian Party, by the way, and who chaired our advisory committee for the presidential run. I think most of your audience knows Irene Mavrakakis, the world's greatest vaccine skeptical doctor, who has conducted her own research and has recently been published in a peer-reviewed journal and is leading the way in making the world understand how important medical freedom is and how badly we've been compromised. I think a lot of your folks know Dave Moskrip, who used to be a very active Republican in the state of Indiana, who has relocated to Florida, who built up the Libertarian Party in Hillsborough County, and who is finding a very welcoming homecoming, having just reached out back again to the Republican Party. And a lot of folks in Indiana know that David's excited to be working with them, and we're coming out to see you, Indiana, real soon. And Corey Fauconnier, who is a terrific guy who used to be the communications director for
out of Virginia, right?
The Commonwealth of Virginia, the Libertarian Party. And Corey has been instrumental in getting together a bunch of folks who are going to start a new chapter of the Republican Liberty Caucus here in Virginia. So we're very, very excited about that. Corey has been very plugged into a number of independent-minded and Republican-minded people here in the Commonwealth. So we're already well along in terms of coalition building. So it's, those four folks have led this effort in a very substantial fashion. And yes, we do have something like 43 people now who are committed to joining. I think everyone has gotten their membership in by now, but if not by this hour, soon, joining the Republican Liberty Caucus. And
so let me ask you on a personal note here, Mike. Kind of, what was your final straw? Like, you had been a libertarian for a while. You had run as a libertarian, I know. And at one point you went, all right, I'm done, right? At one point you went, I'm done. I'm making this move. You agreed. What was the final straw that, like, I saw what happened with Austin. Like, I know Austin, I know what happened to him. What was the final straw for you?
There were a couple of building blocks on the way. I will tell you the final straw. One of them is just the frustration of being able to raise money. Right. And I don't lay that at the feet of any individual or even group. It's just very difficult for the Libertarian Party to gather the resources necessary. I think that there are some structural problems in the way of the Libertarian Party being able to get beyond that and living that, as opposed to just observing it, will change you, right? When you're working as hard as we were and being relatively unsuccessful in terms of raising money, and we had excellent people in the fundraising business working very, very hard and finding it very, very difficult. It's one thing to talk about it. It's one thing to observe it. It's another thing to live it, right? I have stayed in a lot of Motel 6s and I don't mind. But when you start canceling trips because you can't get the money together, that's different.
Got it.
So a lot comes from that experience. But there is another experience, and this might be hard to describe, but work with me. The Kennedy people reached out and asked for me they reached out a couple of times last year, blah, 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 who cares? In December, they asked me to come down to Palm Beach and talk to Bobby about working in the administration. Okay, fine. I'm probably not the right fit, but willing to have a conversation, right? Absolutely. One of the questions that I now understand, I probably didn't understand at the time how important it was, but I'm told by Republicans after my meeting with him, that was the most important question, the penultimate question. A lot of your viewers already know what's coming. Mike, are you able to pledge your personal loyalty to Donald Trump? And my reaction was much less thoughtful than it should have been. I think that any normal grown-ass adult should probably sit there and think about this because it's an important question. And I didn't. I just said no. Because of course that's a stupid... And I don't mean because Donald is a bad guy. That's not at all what I mean. But as someone who has pledged an oath to the Constitution something like 4 times over the span of my career, it feels a little weird even to be asking the question. And then I was able to point out, look, and they asked if I voted for him. No, of course I didn't vote for him. I was on the ballot. I mean, are we having a conversation here? Like, are we on the same page?
Right.
It occurred to me that however weird you may have thought the Republican Party was and has been, and it has been going in a weird direction for a long time. Not that it wasn't not that it wasn't when I was a kid a little bit weird too, back in the day when I was a Republican the first time. But however weird you thought it was, that's a moment when you need to realize it's going in a very weird direction. That's not normal American politics.
Correct.
I don't mean that's the first time it's ever been asked of anyone.
No, I get it.
But systematically, everyone has to answer this question. That's not normal. That's worth a whole nother podcast we're not going to get into, but that's where bad things come from.
Yes.
I would be more comfortable, Larry, I can imagine if you or I or anyone we know ever launches a successful libertarian takeover of the administration, right? I would be more comfortable if a libertarian president would say, if push comes to shove, can I count on your loyalty, even if it means doing something illegal and violating the Constitution? Anyone who says yes, you can't hire.
Right.
You cannot hire that person.
Right.
Not only should they be more thoughtful, but anyone who even finds that a difficult question. So anyway, fast forward, for whatever reason, I don't mean it was necessarily the answer to that question. Could have been, they found
it probably was. It probably was.
Well, they could have found someone better, smarter, younger, better looking who didn't know Larry Sharpe. That was the kiss of death. They said, do you know Larry? And I said, well, yeah, I know Larry.
And they were like, done, out.
It was like, next.
Pocket trash. Yes.
Who knows why? I mean, I'm not an HHS expert anyway, but they did need a budget guy, and
Yep.
those don't grow on trees. So for whatever reason, they went in a different direction. And it has occurred to me in the months since that if we just watch the party in power go in this very, very bad direction without trying to check that progress, it's going to be very difficult at the end of the day, whether that's 10 years from now or 20 or 30. It's going to be very difficult at the end of the day for me to look in the mirror and say, where were you? What did you do?
So I feel like what you're saying is you feel like the Republican Party is still going to be successful or powerful or in charge in 2026 and 2028. And you feel this is the time for a liberty wing to grow within that party so that when Trump goes away, that wing can be the one who kind of controls the party and makes a more libertarian Republican Party. Did I kind of read that right?
You did read it right, or at the very least has substantial influence so that we can check the progress toward authoritarianism. I don't know why I found that so hard to pronounce. Yes, that is the object of the game. That if this party goes full-on authoritarian, it must be over someone's dead bodies. And that's going to be me, these 40 very courageous folks, and hopefully 400 more that we recruit over the next year or so, because the object of the game is to help the Republican Liberty Caucus, which has many, many terrific members already and terrific leaders, to help the caucus become as strong as possible so that we can begin playing a role in some local and congressional races as quickly as 2026.
Let me move to that piece now. In 2026, you're going to want to have Liberty Caucus people running. Now, clearly that means, I'm assuming, you tell me if I'm wrong here, that means you're going to be primarying more of the establishment Republicans who don't want this change. Now,
yes, I fear so.
David Hogg tried that in the Democratic Party, and boy, were they unhappy with him, right? He tried that, and they got rid of him.
And again, thank you for characterizing me as the David Hogg of the Republican Party too. The analogies are just terrific.
I'm just saying maybe, but I'll go to Thomas Massie. Thomas Massie could also be seen as the David Hogg kind of the Republican Party. He could be anyway, but Massie now is almost a pariah. I mean, Trump yells at him almost every other week, right? And now he's untouchable, right? Because of where he is and all those good things. And I'm not unhappy about that. I'm happy he's untouchable. Good. But are the 40 people who are going to be in this Republican Liberty Caucus, are they going to be able to be as powerful as Massie? And will they be able to respond to being pariahs if the establishment deems them? Or you show up and say, hey, I'm going to help, some guy run, or you decide to primary somebody, you help somebody primary, and they go, who are you, Mike ter Maat? You're a bad guy. You're a pariah. You're a Massie sellout, or whatever they call you, right? They do their attack, call you bad names, and tell their donors, don't give Mike any money because he's a bad guy. How do we handle that?
I think that you keep going like a libertarian. You're used to it. You do the right thing. Remember where we're coming from. If you were a Republican becoming a libertarian and someone was nasty to you, I would expect that to be a problem for a softie. There is no one that soft going the other direction.
Yeah, but then doesn't that put you in the same spot? That's my worry, right? If I'm a libertarian and I can only raise whatever 1/10 whatever the Republican Democrat does, I'm still a hero. Like, oh my God, he raised some money. Look, libertarian raised some money. But if I'm a Republican and I can't raise that money, I'm a loser. Right? Is one of the things I talked about Austin when he ran in Missouri. He ran for Senate. And I said, this is what I told him. And I'm not talking out of turn. He would know. I did tell him. I said, dude, don't do this. Run as libertarian. You'll lose. But you will get 4, 5, 6, 8% in the general election. You will be a libertarian hero. You'll have some leverage for the future. If you run as a Republican, you'll be another guy who lost. Nobody's going to care. And that's what happened. And that is my concern. If I'm going to get my ass kicked, wouldn't I rather get a kick as libertarian?
No, because you want to get your ass kicked for the cause. Getting your ass
Okay.
kicked as a libertarian and not getting noticed and not having any influence beyond the 4 or 5% is not good enough. And don't get me wrong, I've gotten my ass kicked for less and have every admiration for those who run as libertarians, because it's a fantastic way to get the message out that is not reflected in the number of votes that you
Okay.
collect, right? That is measured in how many knuckles you can break knocking on doors and how much literature you can pass out. But having said that, without saying that what you said can't possibly happen, that, you know, oh, Larry, it'll never happen, we'll never fail to raise any money or have any success. I'm not suggesting that what you're painting as a distinct possibility and the downside is impossible. What I am saying is this is the fight that matters. If I'm going to be successful wildly or moderately, if I'm going to be a failure wildly or moderately, let it be in this fight, because it is the one that matters. And because it's the one that matters, your efforts are amplified as opposed to dampened.
Okay.
When your efforts as a libertarian are always set aside by fill in the blank, the media, other
Yep.
politicians, voters,
Yep.
too often each other, donors, right? All of these people set aside our successes and downplay them because they think that we can never play a role, that no one will ever listen to us in a majority or even a significant minority. Not so in the Republican Party. It is automatically a door opener. And that's all we need for hardworking folks who are on the right side of principle.
So then let me go to the piece I brought up earlier, which is people said that when I talked to the people who left the Libertarian Party in I think it was 2021 or so, in that area, and they went to the Democratic Freedom Caucus, they told me almost the same thing. They were like, Larry, you don't get it. This is why people don't listen to us. But when we become Democrats, then we become part of the system, and then they'll hear libertarian values because now we're part of the Democratic Party. That's what they told me.
Yep.
That did not happen for them.
Right.
What makes this time different?
The Democratic Party was not facing a schism, on one side of which was principled libertarianism and on the other side of which was authoritarianism. The Democratic Party's problem is that they think that stupid things that don't matter aren't stupid and do matter.
Okay.
And that's different. Whereas the schism inside the Republican Party is explicitly against the principles that we fight for.
Okay.
And that means that the schism is going to put us in exactly the position that we want to be in. We may be in the minority. We may even be in a small minority. But we will be the leading, flag-bearing, most iconic representation of what it is that's on the other side. And as if that weren't enough, and that would be enough for me, I do believe that there are many Americans, I don't have data on this, many Republicans, I mean to say, I don't have data to back up how many, but it's my sense that a large minority of Republicans, and increasing, is frustrated with what's going on with the administration. Not necessarily with the president's instincts, but I would argue that the president is getting crappy staff work. And I think a lot of Republicans resent the way the administration is going, and the ways that they resent that play into our hands. People are upset about the drift away from the Constitution, the absence of due process. People are upset about the lack of fiscal conservatism.
No, I'm with you. I want to ask a question that Dee brings up, which is what that was my next question. But Liberty Lady says, so Mike, in local elections, when there is a libertarian running against a GOP candidate, and it's obvious libertarian is more for freedom, won't the RLC only support the GOP candidate? Now there's two parts I want to bring up. I want to divvy that up a bit.
Yep.
I get a question, but let's assume that you don't like the GOP candidate. You think this GOP candidate is not libertarian enough. So you run a primary against that candidate. If you win the primary, it seems to me you'd say, hey, Libertarian, please step down. We have a Liberty Republican. Please vote for our Republican. That, I assume that's what you want to do. That's what Libertarian Republicans tend to do. But what about the opposite, to her point? What if you primary the GOP, who's a neocon, say, and you lose that primary? And now you have a neocon running because your Liberty Republican lost. And now you have a Libertarian running versus a neocon GOP. Where does the RLC, where does the RLC stand on this?
Well, I think the RLC is going to have to sit that out. And to be clear, it's, the guy you need to ask is the chairman of the RLC, not me. But I believe that the RLC would be in a tough spot to back either one of those candidates. Remember that even if we succeed, as I believe we will, in building up the Republican Liberty Caucus, that does not mean that this is going to all of a sudden be an organization big enough to have substantial interests in 400 congressional races, right? That's not going to happen. It's a matter of picking and choosing.
So does that mean, okay, to answer a question, does that mean if this happens, right, the neocon wins the primary, right? So now it's a neocon GOP versus a Libertarian who's still running. Does the RLC go whatevs and just walk away and endorse nobody? Does the RLC go, no, Republicans are still better than Democrats, so let's vote for the Republican?
And what I'm saying is, yep, I understand. And I think there's two answers. One is, I'm not making policy for the RLC. They have a board of directors that decides these things. But more importantly, to your question, it would be my advice to the board of the RLC that we need to be in the business of picking and choosing races. And that
hold on, no, but I want to pin you on this because you are a leader for this group of 40 or whatever. And to be forward, Mike, if this has success, you and I both know this, it will grow.
Yes.
Right? If you fail, it won't. They'll go, oh, see, Mike failed, whatever. If you succeed, they'll go, I knew Mike all the time. I always knew that. They'll all be your best friend. And that's how it works, brother. That's how it works. If you win, they will all your best friend. And they're all going to come rushing to you, right? They all knew it all the time, right? So all of a sudden now you got 300 people who all love you, right? Fine, whatever. Let's assume that happens. You start to become successful. You personally are going to have some influence in this caucus because you brought these people in. You will have some influence. And now people like D and others are going to say, hey, Mike, where do you stand on this guy, right? I got a neocon and where do you stand? And I think this is the point. If you said, guys, in this race, the Republican matters more, vote for the neocon to beat the Democrat. Or if you said, it doesn't matter, you got to vote for Libertarian in this case. Our guy lost, this neocon's terrible, vote Libertarian. If you said either of those two, it would influence the people in a caucus to take action. Where would you stand?
I get it. Larry, I'm not trying to dodge the question. I'm saying that it would be my advice to an organization that has to choose which races to affect to choose a different race. It would not be my advice. I mean, you're asking an extremely practical question.
Yes.
Not really a philosophical one. You're asking a political, tactical question for a political organization. It would be, and I have participated in a lot of political organizations in my time, it would be my strong advice that if you're a political organization that has the resources to participate in a couple of dozen races per year, that you pick one in which your membership is going to be comfortable backing one particular candidate. It would not be my advice for such an organization to play a role in every single congressional race, right? Even when your membership was not solidly behind one candidate or the other. I think you have brought up a very interesting, I'm not suggesting it's not interesting, it's a fascinating example.
Well, it's because I deal with it in my own state, right? In my state, right? But I'm lucky, though, in my state regard, and I'm lucky and unlucky. Unlucky in that the way my state's set up, but lucky in that I don't have a choice. In other words, the Democrat wins every time in my state, no matter what. At my local level, at my state level, at the national level, they always win. It does not matter, right? So it was easy for me I had to write in because New York's so broken. I had to write in you and Chase, right?
Yep.
But it was easy for me to write in and vote for you. It was easy for me to vote for you, Mike. I just voted in. There was no thought
I
process.
appreciate that. Thank you.
I didn't have to. There's no thought process. You're a libertarian. I'm voting for you. Done. But what if I honestly was worried about a victory or having impact, right? What if I lived in Pennsylvania or I lived, in Michigan? I might have had to think about that. I might have think, ooh, does it matter? Do I care which one? Do you see what I'm saying? In New York, it doesn't matter. I'm going to vote my conscience no matter what New York, because I can't win no matter what. But what if I'm saying,
I do, and I'm not oblivious to the tactical implications. I think that Pennsylvanians should be voting for a libertarian if they align with the libertarian's principles.
Okay.
Specifically because it might interrupt the status quo, forcing the parties, right, to react to that in a way that will better in the future align with your values. I think that everyone, I've said this many times before, everyone needs to vote in a way that recognizes that voting is an investment that pays off in the long term. It can't just be about short term. Parties move, but slowly. They move in reaction to vote counts, but not immediately. So you have to vote for your principles over and over and over again. This is a little bit different question than what should an organization do. I was very upset when names that we will not name right now supported a Republican candidate in Arizona when we had a libertarian who was very good. I would argue was a better candidate than the Republican, but if someone believed that the Republican candidate is better, I get that. They would be wrong, but I understand that. But members of our party were backing, in some cases, or endorsing the Republican. I've got a problem with that. If you're going to support the Libertarian Party, then support the Libertarian candidates. If your endorsement is supposed to be tactical, maybe even strategic in the long run, then use it as such. An organization that has to pick certain battles, pick your battles. Pick the ones where your membership is going to be comfortable so that you can really lean into it and make a difference. But an individual needs to cast that vote in alignment with principles to try to get the party to move in the correct direction in the long run.
All right, let me grab a couple of comments. Got a bunch of comments I want to grab. Amity is there. She says, I do not speak for Mike, but my motivation for joining was to get more Masseys and Pauls in office, regardless of Trump's desire to primary them. Well, let me add with that what Dave is saying. Dave says the problem with Republicans is that the base of the Republican Party doesn't want libertarians in the Republican Party. Now, this goes against what you're saying, Mike. Dave thinks that they don't want it. You think they do.
I think some do. I don't think that Dave is wrong. It's a matter of how many, right? I think that, it may well be that Vegas would say the smart money is against us.
Okay.
Right? A whole lot of people are rallying around the idea, and you've heard this from the administration, Larry. A whole lot of people are rallying around the idea of administration officials saying, well, we won the election and we don't like courts standing in the way of our agenda.
Yep.
That has been explicitly said. That is a problem. That is a problem that does not go away with vote counts.
Okay.
We need to do something about that. But there are many, many Republicans, again, maybe a minority, but there are many Republicans, and increasingly so, who are frustrated with that sort of rhetoric and that sort of attitude. And we need to be the voice that gets out ahead of them, creating a safe space, as a Democrat might say, for them to come out of the closet and tell their own truth, which is that they are frustrated. I think you have a lot of Republicans who are frustrated and unwilling to say so until someone else does in an organized fashion, but also in a full-throated fashion, and we aim to provide that.
Mike Voss says, joining the Republican Party will not add credibility to, nor transition Republicans to libertarianism. I don't think that's what he's saying, Voss. I think what he's saying is that they're already there, and that when this comes up, they will come to him and parts will come to him. Am I reading you right, Mike? I feel like,
I agree with how you put it completely. By the way, I think Mike is probably right. You're not going to do a whole lot of convert. You might do some. Give me some credit, Mike. You might do. You might get some conversion going, but there are a lot of Republicans who have always had policy and attitude overlap with libertarians, and that's what we're looking for, right? No, we're not going to sit around and wait for the 3% who are as hardcore libertarians as Larry Sharpe. What we're looking for is all of the liberty-minded folks in the Republican Party who are fiscally conservative, who are worried about the financial collapse coming to the federal government in the future, who sure are okay with Donald Trump saying we need to control the border, but are not okay with skirting due process in order to effectuate a large number of deportations. We're looking for people who believe in adherence to the Constitution and recognize that there are going to be a whole lot of people who don't agree with that, who want to pick up the Trump mantle as he leaves. But that's not everybody. There are a lot of people in the Republican Party who just want a voice for reason.
So I want to go to what Big John brings up. You're going to be on his show, I think, later on tonight, if I'm not mistaken. You mean it'll be worse than how he was treated by the Mises Caucus and assorted LPNH nationalists? Well, that was my point earlier, Mike. I mean, look, you're human. I'm human. If people say bad things all the time, you're going to get pissed off, right? At one point you go, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I'm done. So, I mean, is he right? Does it matter? I mean, if you go from one group of people who are calling you names to another group of people who are calling you names, right? At one point, do you go, I'm out? Like, it's fun, but I'm out. Does that happen?
That doesn't happen. I mean, it is a thing that happens to humans. People have feelings. I didn't mean it like that, but it's not something that happens to. Well, it's not something that happens to you. You have taken a lot of grief for a long time, and
I
so
get yelled at a lot.
Yep. I didn't stop being a cop just because 15% of Broward County hated my guts. I'm not leaving the Libertarian Party because of a group of people who see things differently than I do, or for whatever reason don't like cops or don't like economists or don't like me.
Right.
There frankly aren't enough of those people in the Libertarian Party. They're noisy, but there just aren't that many of them. The vast majority, I know people don't want to hear this, but the vast majority of people inside the Mises Caucus don't have a problem with me. It's just the noisy ones. The vast majority of libertarians outside of the Mises Caucus don't have a problem with me. It's just the noisy ones. It really, we're not running away from anything. We're running into a fight that we think really matters.
Okay. Michael asked, what does Mike see as the possible core issues in 2028 election year? And how does he foresee liberty being sold as solutions to them, especially to a younger electorate who keeps big government sales pitches, keeps buying? And that's true. If you look at the youngsters, a lot of them are shifting towards more of a left-leaning, big government, socialist. Most of them are, except the young boys. Some of the boys aren't, but a lot of the women are, a vast amount of women are. And overall, a lot of them are moving towards that. It's a valid question. How do you see that?
I think we will be talking about the biggest, most bread and butter issues. We're going to be talking about the economy. Everybody wants to get rich, and we need to create a way for them to do that. We'll be talking about education, even though it's not a federal issue. We will be talking about fiscal conservatism, not only because it keeps more money in your pocket, it helps the economy grow. Everybody wants to get rich. We will be talking about deregulation and all the above energy policy because everyone does want to get rich. And yes, we will be talking about long-term financial collapse because youngsters aren't necessarily into talking about that issue. Some are. And the tech bros are, by the way. The tech bros are, by the way.
True.
But for everyone out there with gray hair, I don't know if you and I know of any such individuals, but people out there with gray hair, recognize that the debt crisis is real. This isn't just some esoteric thing that people bring up when they're mad at the administration from time to time. And if you pay attention to mainstream media, I know you do, Larry. I know you say you don't, but I know you do. If you pay attention to mainstream media, you see the drumbeat has begun. They are starting to embrace this issue. And whoever can put themselves on the right side of that issue will have something going on.
So Dee is mad at McCardle. So she says, so my MAGA Mick Kingmaker, that's who she calls McCardle, has made it quite clear that the LP candidate in 28 needs to back out and pretty much does run for a cabinet seat. Do you have thoughts on this since you're not LP anymore? Do you have any view on that?
I don't know that that's what she said. I kind of hope not, but never mind. Let's set aside whether or not the person to whom you refer actually articulated what it is that you say. I'm not saying you're wrong. I just am not aware of that. I can't put words in someone else's mouth. But in my view, as someone who is a lifetime member of the LP and loves the LP, in my view, the party needs to run, honestly, and I have said this publicly more than once and privately more than once. I would love to see Spike Cohen run for president. But back on track. The LP needs to run someone who is going to represent, I want to say three different things. Libertarianism, absolutely.
Okay.
Number two, has to represent the reasonable side of what is the public debate. And sometimes we get away from that. We need to lean into the very biggest bread and butter issues and stop talking about issues that only matter inside of the Libertarian Party.
But that doesn't really. So are you saying, even though you would be a member of the Republican Party at that point, assuming that you have a decent, we're going to make the assumption that the person who's running in 2028, the Republicans running, is someone who the RLC could endorse, right? So it would not be a neocon with that assumption, right?
Okay. The
assumption that the person that the Republicans pick would not be, Marco Rubio, right? It would not be, right? It wouldn't be that. It would be
Thomas Massey's running for president, and we have endorsed him, and we're working our butts off to make him successful. That's our dream sequence. Keep going.
But I wouldn't even go that far as Massey. If Massey was running, half the Libertarian Party would abandon the Libertarian Party, right? I mean, I'm being honest. Right. Bad example, because we all like bail Libertarian Party right there, right? So, and he would never win the Republican nomination,
right?
But I'm just saying, somebody who you think is liberty enough that
you have halfway, right?
And you go, yeah, we're prepared to endorse that candidate. Would you be saying, hey, Libertarian Party, please step down? Or would you be saying, no, please run a great candidate, right? Because now it's your best interest.
Please be running a great candidate. And the reason I would be saying that is because, by the way, I said he has to represent three things. I hadn't gotten to the third. The third thing that the candidate has to represent is the party itself.
Okay.
This is very important. I think that everyone in a leadership role within the Libertarian Party has to be focused on building the Libertarian Party brand. If you don't believe that, then on some level you got to say, maybe you shouldn't be in the leadership of the Libertarian Party. Because the party is an organization that is highly dependent on its brand. If you don't think the brand of the Libertarian Party is important, then that's pretty synonymous with saying you don't think the Libertarian Party is important. You see where I'm going. This is not an organization that builds widgets, right? This is an organization that lives and dies by the image it projects in defense of its principles. And so I would argue that whoever represents the party as a nominee needs to represent the party in terms of its brand. Now, if you don't think that the brand of the party is important, if you argue that I'm wrong, that we're not actually a political party, what the Libertarian Party is a social club.
I've heard that before.
Yeah. And, we get together and we have good parties. We talk about principles. And then at the very last second, we decide who to back, a Democrat, a Republican, a Libertarian, Green Party, Independent, Maha. We decide that at the last minute. If that's your attitude, which is fine, that's not really a political party. That's a dinner club. And I love me a dinner club. Don't get me wrong. If that's what you want to be, then go be the best that thing that you can. Go be a dinner club. But don't tell me you're a political party. Become a leader of a political party. And then tell me, the brand doesn't really matter. Those things don't fit. It's like being a dinner party and saying the dinner doesn't matter.
Right. Okay. All right, so I want to talk about this for a second, then I have a couple more questions I want to bring up. Guys, if you like what you're seeing, please click the button known as Lima, India, Kilo, Echo. Please click that button. The like button does matter. Please do so. If you haven't shared this someplace, why aren't you sharing this? Share some. If you don't share this, you hate liberty. That's it. If you haven't shared this someplace, you hate liberty. That's how it works. Please don't hate liberty. Share this someplace.
It might be a little heavy-handed, but I see where you're going. I like that.
Oh, this is my show. I'm authoritarian. That's correct. Yes, 100%. Yes. So please also follow me on Please Sharpe.
By the way, there's an analogy there in the Republican Party too. Just to wrap that up, if you're representing the Republican Party, you need to represent the brand.
True.
It can't. I'm not going to name names. It can't all be about an individual. You have a responsibility to advancing the interests of the party as such.
There we go. If you want to follow what Mike is doing, please head over to Twitter/X and follow him at Mike ter Maat _. If you are listening to this, it is MikeTerMaat _. Please check that. I want to make sure I was covering all my points there if I could. All right, let me grab a couple. I've got a couple questions from the audience. JD says, Mike's move is on the cutting edge of what's happening in libertarian stratosphere. Thank you, Larry, for bringing us cutting edge libertarian content. And thank you, Mike, for being on the show today. Well, that was nice of him saying that.
And I didn't expect that from JD Vance. That's awfully nice.
JD Vance does love you, Mike. It's clear. See that? Yeah, you got him on your side.
Yeah. Ask JD Vance in another 6 months how he feels.
The Orthodox Moore says libertarians should have no issue supporting an all the above strategy. Where you can't get a libertarian office, put Thomas Massie or Jared Polis. Run and support your own thought at the Sharpe Way. Oh, thank you. You gave me Sharpe Way a plug at the end. Thank you for that. Yes. Yep. But I guess that does go to another point though, right? When it comes to running these candidates, are you going? I mean, I could see, and this makes libertarians angry, I could see you pulling former libertarian candidates into the Republican Libertarian Caucus to run, because they would go in libertarian and be like, oh, I can't raise money, or I can't do XYZ or whatever. And you go, hey, run as a Republican. We'll get you a couple grand. You'll at least have a shot at this. Do that. Should libertarians be like, oh, great, you're getting liberty people in? Should they be mad? You're taking our candidates? I could see both sides of that.
Well, it's hard to argue that is evil and at the same time consider ourselves ethically happy when we recruited Justin Amash, for example. That road may go both ways, but that has to be up to the individual. Okay. We have to be a receiver as much as a recruiter of candidates. If a candidate thinks it's a good fit, then it is. And parties need to be long-term investments. No one should be going back and forth. This is not like this decision was taken lightly by anybody on our team or by myself in particular. This is a one-way street. To change parties is a big deal.
There's the other issue, right? The odds of you being able to come back are slim, right? It's not really realistic in that regard. It's like Austin probably couldn't come back. I think you're there now. That's kind of where you are.
I would think so.
Yeah.
I'm not really worried about that. But
yep. The Scientific Libertarian says, I disagree with Mike on a lot of things. I still voted for him. Look at that. You still have a fan.
Well, either that or everyone else more. I don't know.
True. Could have been that. Yes.
Right.
The Orthodox Moore has more to say. He says, without running and supporting the strongest candidates for president, etc., there'll be no pressure on the RLC or DFC to be held accountable to the Liberty Movement. So his point is that the Libertarian Party has to run hard so that it can force the
Yes.
RLC and DFC to actually take
Absolutely.
action.
That's very, very well said. He is exactly correct.
Well, there we go. I like that.
Same thing, by the way, with respect to a caucus inside of a party, whether it's the RLC or the Mises caucus or the CLC or the Radical caucus. And I do love the caucuses inside the Libertarian Party. You have to be true to your values to push people in the direction that you want them to go.
Missy asks, would the RLC throw its support to any Libertarian candidates? Do you think there will be a reverse side? Do you think that would happen?
The short, I don't know that. The most honest, ask me again. Do me a favor. Don't condemn me for not knowing the answer to that question. Well, I guess you can, but I'm asking for some grace here. Ask me again in a few months. I just don't know the answer to that. Again, the RLC is not huge, certainly not yet. It may be in a couple of years. But it is a robust organization with terrific leaders already and lots of members who have strong feelings about these things. I do not believe that as a caucus inside of the Republican Party, they're going to be interested in backing a Libertarian Party candidate, a Libertarian with a lowercase L, absolutely, but a Libertarian candidate or an independent candidate. That strikes me as an unlikely thing that the members of the RLC would rally around.
Super Weapons says, I should say, until the freedom movement also builds a media mechanism to help expound the culture of liberty, we're going to continue to be a cyclical state of irrelevance. I don't get the, I guess Mises Caucus hate. What's WSO? I'm not sure what WSO is.
Whatsoever.
Oh, no. Whatsoever.
No, whatsoever.
I don't know. I'm not sure what that is. I don't know. But yes. But my point here I get is, this is my last question. Can the RLC gain traction enough to where it does get the media that he's talking about? Right now, basically the only media guys like Massey get is whenever Trump yells at him. Right? That's kind of the media.
Well, the only national media attention. A lot of folks in his district think he's the bee's knees.
Ah, okay. So you think this is all going to be local?
No, I don't think it's all going to be local. I'm just pointing out that, there are a lot of local candidates. By the way, the RLC backed someone that we all know, John Marietta, is a Republican in Fayette County. Got his own radio show. Just, he's the Larry Sharpe of the Republican Party. He got an RLC endorsement, which I was proud to help facilitate. And he believes that it mattered a little bit in his local race. He's not going to get national attention off of it, but he believes that it helped in a very tight race that came down to hundreds of votes. And he was glad to have that backing, and he will work with the RLC going forward. This is a very tiny example, but an interesting example that we would like to multiply 100 times.
So before we wrap this up, I've kept you here for over an hour. I apologize, sucking up your entire day. Is there anything that I missed? Something that we should have brought up? Something that you want to say that I did not get out?
That is the big picture. And the only thing that we didn't touch on is how important this is. I don't mean me. I don't even mean our team. I don't even mean the Republican Liberty Caucus. I don't even mean the Republican Party. But the United States is facing some real important threats. I would argue potentially existential threats to the government. The financial collapse that will come in less than a couple of decades if we don't correct course. If our military foreign policy posture snaps back to what it has been in the past, that's a problem. For a lot of reasons, including advancing technology and the proliferation of nuclear weapons, but also just the idea of as I talk about all the time, the law of large numbers. You cannot spin the wheel as many times as the U.S. government has and expect to extricate yourself without triggering a multi-theater international conflict. And the third one I have spent a lot of time talking about over the past year and is particularly in our minds today with what's going on in Los Angeles. I do worry that there is potential there for a downward spiral in terms of civil unrest. I don't think what's happening
yeah.
in Los Angeles is going to trigger that.
Right.
I don't know that it won't, but one could easily imagine as governments get farther and farther away from the Constitution, and people get increasingly frustrated with that, and with, you know, the role that social media plays in not only triggering protests, but spreading them from one city to another.
Yeah. Yep.
That you could imagine a confluence of an overreactionary state government or federal government. You can imagine what would happen if martial law were declared. You can imagine what would happen if martial law were declared on the heels of an ordered lockdown in response to a virus in the future.
Yep. Absolutely.
You get where I'm going. It's
I
not so
do.
much a prediction as a fear.
Yep.
That whereas when you and I were growing up, Larry, the idea that a downward spiral of civil unrest could shake the government of the United States seemed really
crazy.
far-fetched.
Yep. Absolutely. We were more worried about like the Russians invading or something like that.
Exactly. More likely Russians would show up on the beaches of Hilton Head, right?
Right. Exactly. Yes.
But not quite so much anymore do we laugh at that prospect. I worry.
Okay. And the fourth, if I remember right, you had 4 points. The fourth was AI, right?
I worry about AI, and I worry about it because governments are very good at leveraging technology to do some very bad things. That's all I want to say about that.
That is their skill set. That's true. That is their skill set. They're good at that. So I want to bring up another libertarian I know, Tub. Tub says the duopoly might be necessary vehicle to move liberty, unfortunately. I do get his worry. I guess he's on your side on that one. So, right. So you got Tub. So, and Tub's a great guy. So you got him. So yes.
Tub's a great guy.
Yes.
Yeah, so, he might be right. I would like it if it were not a duopoly, but to his point, if the duopoly is something that we need to take as given for the moment, then, by the way, I continue to support anyone who can take us from a duopoly to a multi-party system. Anything that builds up the Libertarian Party, anything that launches a different third party that can become big and powerful and challenge the duopoly, absolutely, we need to support that effort one way or another.
There we go. All righty, guys. I want to say thank you, Mike, for coming out today. I really appreciate you giving me time. I know you got a lot of stuff going on today. I appreciate it so much. Everyone for watching. Thank you so much for watching and for commenting. If you want to comment after this is over, please do so. I will try to get Mike to come back on to answer some questions. If not, I'll answer some too. So pop some if you can. If you're watching this afterwards, if you're watching this after it's already over, remember, videos might pop up. Please watch another video too and put some questions. Guys, have a great day. I will not be on for a couple of days. I will be off to Freedom Fest as of tomorrow. I will see you all very soon.